Welcome to a wildlife photography edit. Today I'm gonna take this raw file and turn it into something like this while explaining you what sliders I use and why I use them. So usually I really just edit landscapes and sometimes cityscapes, but I've got a pretty cool shot of this bird at the zoo, ISO 200, 300mm with a Canon 600D, which is a crop sensor body, f5.6 and 1/400th of a second shutter speed. So let's get started with editing. First thing, I'm definitely gonna raise the shadows a little bit. I don't want to do it too much because I still want a little bit of depth and darkness in these feathers. Then highlights. I'm really not sure actually. Usually I would bring down the highlights, but since this is not a regular landscape picture, I think I might even leave the highlights at 0 because there's really nothing that I would really want to reduce. But I feel like the overall exposure is a bit too dark, so I'm just gonna increase that by about almost one stop, but not quite. And then whites, I'm definitely gonna bring up the whites just so the feathers look nice and bright. Make sure nothing is clipped there. And that definitely looks pretty good. Then blacks, I think I'm gonna bring down the blacks. I really don't mind if the blacks clip, just because I really want those feathers to be dark, a really nice contrast between the white and dark feathers. But at the same time, I don't want to bring it down so much that there's no texture anymore in the feathers. You know, I still want to see where the feathers go from one to another. Then clarity, really not sure. I don't think I'm gonna add any plus clarity here, just because that exaggerates the texture too much. I'd rather go with a little bit of minus clarity to show a little bit of softness in the feathers. Something like this. And contrast slider itself, I think the contrast is pretty cool how it is already, so I don't have to change anything there. So let's go to color temperature, of course, very important tool. I could do this manually and just slide around until I like a color, or because I have white feathers here in the picture, I just can grab this little pinpointer and drag it over a white spot, and it pretty much chooses the white balance, the perfect white balance for me. So I really like this look. In terms of vibrance and saturation, I really don't think I want to change anything there. And let's go down to the tonal curve. Definitely gonna bring up the highlights here just so we get even more pop and even more whiteness in these white feathers. Not gonna do it too much here, otherwise it looks like a illuminated bird. The lights, I'm not quite sure what I want to do with the lights. I think I'm gonna leave them around 0. Darks, maybe bringing them up just a tiny bit. And shadows. Shadows really look good how they are. So we're already done with the two most important adjustments, which is the basics adjustments and the tonal curve. But when I look at the picture right here, I think I want to try at least how it looks in black and white. I mean, this picture kinda has too much background. Even though we shot this at 300mm on a crop sensor body, which is about 480mm, it still is a bit too far away, so I'm actually gonna crop this a bit closer, so there's not as much background in the picture. Something like this. A good cropping with birds is always you have 2/3 of the empty space in the foreground and 1/3 of the empty space in the background, so your eyes have a way to breathe. Let's see here, for example, now we have 2/3 of the space behind his head and 1/3 of the space in front of his head, and you see it doesn't work nearly as well as it does when I crop it like this. Alright, so I like this crop way better. We really have the bird filling the frame. Now in terms of black and white, I'm not quite sure. I think I actually like color a little bit better. Then HSL tool, here you could just go to hue, saturation, luminance, drag this little pinpointer over a color you want to change in the image, and just bring up and down your mouse slider. However, because there's really not one very prominent color here, it's not like a sunset or a landscape photo or something like this, I don't think it's necessary to use these adjustments here. Then split toning, here you can add a kind of different color in the image. It's almost like color temperature, but you can choose other colors than just blue and yellow. And also it doesn't add color overall evenly on the image, it just kinda adds a bit more color in the highlights. So I'm really not sure if I want to add anything here. I really like this tool for sunrise or sunset photos where I just want to add a little bit more color or a different shade of color. But for this wildlife picture, I really don't think I'm gonna add anything here. Shadows does the same thing as highlights, but really doesn't work that well for wildlife pictures, especially something like this here. Then detail. Detail is definitely a very important tool. You want to make sure that you zoom in 1:1 and sharpen a little bit the image. Now sharpening really can help a lot to your image in pretty much every case, unless you have like a super long exposure, smooth, silky water photo. But a picture like this always can use some sharpening. Just be sure not to overdo it. But a little bit, maybe around 60, 70 here, will work pretty well. Then once you're done with sharpening, you want to bring the masking slider to the right, so you make sure you don't sharpen any of the non-textured surface of the image. For example, here these feathers really don't have any texture in itself that I want sharpened. So I just want to make sure that these feathers, you know, the edges of the feathers get sharpened so the overall picture looks a bit sharper. So I think I'm gonna stick around there. Then noise reduction. I mean, I really don't think there's too much noise in this picture. Maybe just a little bit. I really don't like the noise reduction tool that much because it makes the whole picture look a bit more plasticky, but I think around +10 works pretty well here. Then the color slider, really great tool, as you surely know if you've seen any of my previous videos. I really love that tool, and as you can see there are some purple and green fringing here in this picture, actually quite a lot. So you want to make sure you bring the color slider to the right until all of that disappears, all of that green and purple color noise disappears in your shadows. And that looks way better and cleaner than before. Here's before and here's after. Really great what the slider does. Then lens corrections, just gonna do my two basic things: enable profile correction, and it will get rid of all of the distortion and vignetting. Now vignetting really is an optional part, but I think I'm gonna leave it in for this picture. Then the second thing I'm always gonna do here is remove chromatic aberration. Just get rid of the purple and green fringing on the high contrast edges. Then effects, you could add some more vignetting here. Actually, let me try if I wanna do that. I'm really not quite sure. I thought I'm not gonna add any vignetting in this photo, but how it looks right now, I think it actually works out quite well. Here's after vignetting and here's before. Yeah, I kinda like that better, so I'm just gonna stick there. And camera calibration, the most important thing here is the profile. You just wanna make sure that you go through all of these profiles and just stick with whatever looks best. I feel like this almost looks a little bit better camera neutral. This is definitely too much. This doesn't look bad. Let's see, Adobe Standard with camera neutral. I think I like this a little bit better. It's really not that big of a difference. For example, in a fall landscape or a sunset, this can have a huge difference, but for this kind of picture where there's really not that much color, it doesn't have that great of an impact. And the same thing applies with these primary color sliders. They really can have a big impact with a really colorful picture, but a picture like this, I don't really think it has that big of an impact, so I'm just gonna leave them out. And with that said, we're already done with the global adjustments, and a thing that I notice is that the bird isn't really straight, so I'm just gonna straighten that a little bit so his legs get a little bit more straight. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna do it like this because that's not natural, but just a little bit, something like this right here. definitely looks better than before. And then in terms of local adjustments, I mean, I really don't like the background here just because it's nothing beautiful or interesting. You know, this picture really isn't one of the best ever because of the background. If the background would be different, maybe a nice landscape, or at least some nice textures and colors, it could be a really cool picture, but unfortunately, I don't think there's much we can do here. So in terms of local adjustments, I actually don't think I'm gonna do anything here. I usually would add dodge and burning with pretty much every of my image, which means making individual parts of the image brighter or darker. This can help to bring a lot of contrast and differentiation and interest in the lighting of the whole scene. But for this wildlife picture, I really don't think it will work out. It's mostly a thing that I do with street photography, cityscape, or especially landscape pictures. So I think I am done with this picture here. Maybe a thing that I'm gonna do lastly is bring the clarity slider a bit more towards the right. As you can see, it's almost a bit soft. Sometimes really adjustments that you do at the early stages can seem a little bit too much once you look at the picture for a few minutes. So I'm gonna bring the clarity slider a bit to the right, still stay in minus because I really like this sort of softness, I just don't want to have it as much. So let's see, as always, where we started at. Once again, this really isn't a great picture, but here's the start, raw file, and compared to this, I definitely think it's a pretty decent difference. As always, thank you very much for watching. Once again, really not that great of a picture, but it's really about the difference between before and after. I'm definitely gonna make some more landscape photo videos in the next few days. So please keep taking awesome pictures, and I wish you a great day.